I first took LSD when I was 16, and it forever changed my life. It deconditioned me, and I saw that at a deep level, everything in the universe was connected and brimming with love. Sounds became colors, and colors became sounds. I also left my body and had telepathic experiences. I found that the LSD experience enhanced my artistic creativity too. These trips forced me to radically rethink my reality now. As a result of these experiences, I began to study yoga, astrology, vegetarianism, numerology. And although I don't advocate the use of drugs per se, for me, LSD was a powerful smartphone.
From my late teens to early 20s, I went through many changes of appearance. I seemed to be a bit of a chameleon, an artful dodger. Of course, fashion and rock music and psychedelic drugs played a big role in how I dressed and approached reality. Rebelliousness seems to run in the family, and I've always felt like a bit of an outsider.
Music soft and sweet, I met a dusky maiden one day. With her naughty glance and charming hula dance, she made me want to linger and play.
Some of my interest in sound and making experimental music came about from a certain painting technique that I was using. I was airbrushing using stencils and began to see that it could probably be used with tape recorders. Just as I was layering color through stencils on paper, I could be layering sound on tape recorders. So I began to experiment, at first in a very primitive way, using found objects as sound sources. Things like bicycle wheels, cheap tape recorders, and basically anything I could get my hands on. As time went on, I refined my techniques and got more sophisticated equipment. I also had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles and Seattle to study in real electronic music studios. When I came back to Vancouver in 1977, the punk thing had just started. I soon became involved in a punky electronic music group called E. In E, we would use diverse sound sources like electric blenders and toys. I would also drop things on my guitar, things like candy hearts, toy bombs, soldiers, rubber penises. Eventually, the band ended because of personality conflicts. I'd have to say that it was at art school at the Emily Carr College of Art where a lot of my energy was channeled in a creative way. As much as I don't like to support schools as such, the art school gave me a lot of freedom to play. So I began to kind of be interested in all these avant-garde ideas and was exposed to all these kinds of different people like Laurie Anderson, and began to play with people and zippers and spit safety pins as sculptural objects. At one of the early punk gigs, during the break, a bunch of the punk girls got up and started fooling around with the mics, and one of them let out a loud scream. It was magnificent, it was great. I thought, too bad it couldn't go on longer. And it gave me the idea to have a woman fronting in my band doing really high-pitched screaming type of vocals. I had actually heard Diamanda Gallis and other sopranos doing abstract sounds. I was aware of Meredith Monk and Laurie Anderson, these kinds of people, but I wanted something more powerful. Anyway, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it, but screaming seemed to be the perfect type of vocal for me. It was kind of like a horror movie thing, the whole Alfred Hitchcock approach. At a certain point, I thought a screaming female would be the perfect metaphor or symbol for a fucked up social system. So I asked Ebra, then my girlfriend, if she could scream for an extended period of time. She tried and was incredible.
The singer was just, there was nothing but a constant amount of screaming, like somebody was being raped, murdered, like every possible ugly thing that could happen to that person. And that was considered singing vocal at the time for that band. And they had the cops called on them because they thought somebody was being beaten or raped or something, right? And when the police showed up, it was just like, trying to explain to the cops that, no, this is just the way our band is or whatever, right?
Longest I think anyone ever lasted actually through an entire Tunnel Canary performance was 10 minutes. The actual Politburo, again at this time, we would immediately flee onto the street because they were incredibly loud, very, very loud. Louder than one could possibly imagine. Why the name Tunnel Canary is quite appropriate. If you couldn't get out of the noise or you're going to die. Period. Yeah. Eric, next.
If you went to like a punk rock show and you saw Tunnel Canary, you would have like a lot of people there, even though they were in the hardcore scene, where they're kind of saying like, I think they were just kind of confronted with this sort of thing of like, what the fuck is this? Like, who are these guys? What are they doing and how do they, because they still really didn't fit into it.
They were ahead of their time, and like any band that's ahead of their time, people, because people aren't in the right frame of mind yet to hear that kind of music, so, it's easy to cut down a band like that, but basically, when you're looking at much later, I'd say 4 to 5, 6 to 10 years later, that was the in sound. That's what everybody was trying to copy or be like or anything else, and all of them were kind of cut down by the general public because nobody could understand where these people were coming from.
What was Tunnel Canary like? Tunnel Canary were like these crazy creatures, these caterpillars, jiggling off of sonic branches of one kind or another. I mean, it was just crazy colors and lines and shapes jagging all over the place, and crazy sounds coming from guitars and screaming, and everything kind of jumbled together in quite a pointy mess. This is how I remember Tunnel Canary. And at the time, it was impossible to tell where this may all lead, but it was certainly exciting at the time.
Noise, noise, noise. It's just increased since Tunnel Canary. We're all in the coal mine of the world with noise, period. Just Tunnel Canary, if you actually think about what's actually happened in terms of the decibel level of the world, it's increased at an incredible volume. I can't imagine what the noise level is like in China right now as it's undergoing an industrial revolution with trains, cars, all that heavy machinery. And of course, in Vancouver, now that we've got the Olympics, building projects underway, we are all in a noise tunnel in this particular location on this very loud planet. That's pretty good. I think that's enough, don't you? I do.
Well, I recorded them.
Okay.
At Ocean Sound. They kept blowing the circuits. Drove the guy nuts. You know, here's these two soft-spoken vegetarians, sweet, sweet, sweet people who just had this really loud, obnoxious music, and I just thought the dichotomy, it was interesting. So I, took money out of my own pocket to record them, and, I guess we ended up doing things together.
I was one of the prime organizers to put that festival on. I don't actually remember who else played there, but I remember that I asked Nathan if Tunnel Canary would play, and he said he would rather do a solo guitar performance, that would be more appropriate. So he did with his amazing setup, his guitar and all his effects, and compared to the other performers that were there who were doing kind of the more spacey, Tangerine Dream type electronic stuff, he just totally blew everybody's minds. Not necessarily in a good way for those people. My biggest memory of that is like people just starting to leave, and people were swearing and like wanting to talk to the organizers, so I had to leave the performance and go outside and talk to these people and kind of placate them and explain what was going on, why this was a valid form of music in my mind, and apologize. And I think we had to refund some money as well for paying customers. It was loud, and it was very intense, really intense feedback. And it wasn't, the kind of music that you expect to have on as background.
There was an article that someone wrote, and I had to go out and photograph street musicians. And I went around to everywhere that I could think that there were street musicians, and I missed Tunnel Canary. They had a street musician act that they did where he played guitar and then she just screamed and screamed and screamed, and people just went by and gave them money, I guess, or ran away, I don't know. But of all of the people, I would have loved to have found them on the street.
Were quite primitive. Ebra didn't have a microphone, and I had a cheap Japanese guitar, which had cost me about $35. I had a friend customize it by putting in an AM/FM radio and a noise generator. I then ran it through a distortion plus pedal and a pig nose amp, which gave it enough volume for the street. The first performances were quite improvised, spur-of-the-moment things. We had written a few songs, but there was no set structure to them. What we were basically doing was making social protest music. When you come home from the camp, stand in the heritage movement. When you do the things you shouldn't do.
Kind of like put them in that kind of, and especially Ebra maybe in that kind of vein, similar to kind of like to Crafts, where it's a lot more political. And to me, what I really liked about it is that whole kind of like chaos theory and the whole kind of questioning authority, which was really big at that time.
Don't you know it's against the rules to leave the school grounds without permission? Rules. All the time rules. I'm sick of them.
You know, I think another detriment was that the guitar solo was really dissed at the time too. I think it still is. But it was really prohibited form of music, the guitar solo, and that's basically what they're doing. That guitar solo was totally happening.
Well, I was listening to these avant-garde guitarists like Derek Bailey, Keith Rowe, and Henry Kaiser, who, it seemed to me, were using new approaches and new languages on the guitar. And I thought, this could be applied to a rock band, or should be applied to a rock band. The possibilities, it seemed to me, were endless. I could rub things on the strings, I could use any tuning I wanted, I could use dissonant tunings. And I thought, with the punk platform, the possibilities were endless.
Liked about the band was that we could really experiment technically with using instruments and sounds in new ways. And I bought a cheap bass at a pawn shop, I think, and just sort of went crazy on it. I pulled the frets off to make it fretless. I put in all kinds of weird electronics and pickups, and Nathan had all kinds of strange electronic gear too that I attached weird things onto the strings to create rhythms. And Nathan was really interested in using instruments in new ways and just creating sounds that were really not meant to come out of that instrument. I quite like that because it really meant we could experiment with sounds that nobody else was producing.
I just sort of stumbled across them, and I don't know, I liked them immediately. Even though I see everybody going outside for a smoke. They were like this backup band from hell. I was just always just like in sheer thrall. It's like A-list guitarist, just like, holy fuck, this guy's amazing. Like, how the hell is he making those noises? And like the voice, the combination of the two. I mean, hindsight is 20/20. I mean, at the time, I don't think I was doing my music business school thing or anything, but I have to say, looking back on it now, if I could go back, I would have grabbed them, would have grabbed the shades, taken to New York, put ourselves up there, and we would have had a couple of hits within a while. It would have been easy. They would have been so fucking big. And it wasn't until later on that I got to go to New York and I got to see that scene. And I realized, I was like, holy fuck, this is the place. The strangest looking thing I had fucking seen, period, at the time. I mean, I guess looking back on it now, it's looking, he probably fit right in with Marilyn Manson or anything like that now. But this was like then. He was quite shocking in appearance. And so was Madeline Ebra. I don't know what her real name was. I just sort of remembered her from art school.
So in the early days on the scene, on the punk scene, you know, we started to play around with, you know, clothing. We started to play around with, you know, hair, you know, cutting it yourself. I mean, it was really liberating to cut your own hair because you'd been under this thing where, you know, everybody wanted it symmetrical. And I got this idea to make it asymmetrical. So I started shaving parts and you know, I thought this kind of mental crazy look was really neat, you know, and when you went on the street, people just like, they'd walk. And basically when gel came along in the Mohawk period, you know, like we got into that. I think, I don't know, Mad Dog and I we might have had the first Mohawks in the city.
I met Ayla back in the late 70s, early 80s at a store of mine called Cabbages and Kinks in Gastown. And he was just one of those eccentric customers who would come in and a little bit shy, but he would buy my most outrageous items, whether it be robes or jackets, just the oddest things. And slowly we became friends, and then I would start saving pieces for him, and he would just take any crazy piece of clothing that I had. Cabbages and Kinks was a little bit of a hangout store. We used to bring a lot of clothing in from London, England, the hair dye, the studs, the buttons, the zipper t-shirts that we made in the back room, and all sorts of crazy clothing, as well as, you know, mostly vintage clothing.
The way that they were on stage is how they were in real life walking around the city. So you could see Ayla walking down the street waving his freak flag high, so to speak.
Riding his bicycle.
Or riding his bike. I've heard that he had an interesting customized bicycle, and he might have a bongo slung around his shoulder and wearing his punk Krishna hybrid and riding around the West End. So I always respected that too, because they walked it like they talked it, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm an artist and a musician, actually.
Is that it?
Drugs, or he says. Drugs are trouble. Don't forget that. Been interested in shamanism, or I shouldn't say always, but for a long time, and the band was an extension of that. I've also been interested in bringing the feminine energy into a masculine context, or into men's lives or personalities. To that extent, I think, in our culture, the masculine is overemphasized, and we need to kind of balance it with feminine energies, and that was one of the reasons I picked the female vocalist. I was influenced by East Indian philosophy and the wrathful deities shown in Tibetan mandalas, the goddesses like Kali and Durga, as healing energies, as primal universal energies that could actually transform negative environments or negative psychological states, and that was one of the functions I saw Tunnel Canary performing, a kind of cleansing. A lot of people have identified us with the noise movement, or as they call us, noisemeisters, but I never considered the music to be noise per se. I had thought it all was music. For me, I didn't designate, this is music and this is not music. So it was very confusing for me at first when people just, continually call it noise. Now, it's a bit of a compliment. This was the second guitar I had built that had a radio in it, an AM/FM radio. Also, this one has a microphone built in the headstock, vocal microphone. Also high-frequency treble boost. And also two inputs for adding either vocals from another person or another instrument. It was the second one. The first one was destroyed at Rock Against Reagan. This particular guitar, you can hear the radio, and it's a 12-string. So it's a nice one. Stages in my career. This was early music stuff, about 78, I guess, on a cover of Snot Rag magazine, where I'm dropping bombs and marshmallows on my guitar. We played with Henry Kaiser at that particular gig. This is me doing spit sculpture. This piece is called Galaxy. I did a number of these pieces with various props, including totem poles and other kinds of things. I thought spit was an incredible sculptural medium because of its flexibility, transparency, and what could I say? It's easy to move or carry around. What else? These are various posters I designed for Tunnel Canary and Guitar Weirdos. Most of these posters are dated between 79 and 82.
I was performing and I would scream for 15 minutes or half an hour. Of course, it was very draining, and emotionally I was exhausted after. But the actual screaming part, it wasn't cathartic for me. It wasn't like I had to scream because I felt like I had to release this angry energy or anything like that. Basically, it was just a vehicle for the music. And what really turned me on was the lyrics, because even though I was screaming, you couldn't understand them. They were very, very powerful. They were poetry, and that was something that Nathan created with these very powerful lyrics. And just playing with the different sounds that were created by also different ethnic people, like Tibetans and East Indian and Indonesian. All those types of musics were very much influenced our music and my vocal style. So at the time, my daughter was 3 years old, and she had blonde hair and just like a little Alice in Wonderland kind of figure. And then people would see Ayla and I walking down the street, and we looked very radical, quite hardcore, black clothing, maybe rags or hair all out to there, and they would think, oh, that poor little girl with her parents. But the exact opposite is actually true when you looked at us visually, because we had a hard appearance, but we're into total harmlessness and vegetarianism because of the harmlessness, and into meditation. We didn't smoke, we didn't drink, so we didn't quite fit into any like punk niche either, and we also didn't fit into any hippie alternative niche. We kind of we were kind of walking our own ground at that point. And it was a little bit alienating for us because people couldn't relate to us because they might have been coming from one area or the other, and we kind of blended the two together. But I felt that was very natural, and one of the things we were mainly trying to do is to bring down this very spiritual, unique energy to the planet. And we were just acting as a vehicle for that to go through us.
You'd go and you just go, oh yeah, here they come, and you just like wait for the blast and just get right into it and kind of encourage them, and because those who stayed were usually the ones who were most aligned with the sensibility. And for a lot of people, I think initially the sensation of being confronted by, just two people making a hell of a lot of noise, plus the frequency of the woman's voice at full blast, was an encounter that was not easily forgotten.